All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the third part of our five-part public benefits training series for unemployment insurance. My name is Allison Persich, and I'm the training and volunteer specialist here at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. We hope you'll join us for the rest of the public benefits training series. On December 1st, we'll host a training on Social Security disability benefits and interim disability assistance. And on December 8th, we'll conclude the series with immigrant eligibility for benefits. I also want to give a special thanks to Erin Lubier, who chairs this public benefits series. At the end of the training, I'm going to send out a short link for an anonymous evaluation. If you have 2 minutes, please fill it out and let us know what you think. After you submit the eval, you'll find a link to download today's slides. And just as a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so please don't share any personal client identifying information. If you have a question, please utilize the chat function at the bottom of your screen. You can ask a question at any point during the training. And now I want to briefly introduce our speakers for the training, Drake Hagner, Nicole Dooley, and Tanya Love. Drake Hagner is a supervising attorney in the Public Benefits Unit at the Legal Aid Society of the District of Columbia. Nicole Dooley is a senior staff attorney, also in the Public Benefits Unit at the Legal Aid Society of the District of Columbia. And Tanya Love is the program director of the Claimant Advocacy Program, also known as CAP. Drake, Nicole, and Tanya all represent workers in unemployment matters in the district. Thank you all so much for being here today, and I'll turn it over to our speakers to begin today's webinar.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Drake Hagner from Legal Aid. We're really happy to be here with you today to talk about unemployment law in DC and the experiences our DC workers have been having during this coronavirus pandemic. So I'm going to let Nicole and Tanya also just chime in to say hello. Tanya, would you like to say hi first?
Hello, everyone. I hope this is a very informative webinar or Zoom call. Take care.
Hey everyone, this is Nicole. I'm glad you're able to join us.
Great. So we're going to start off our hour together. This time is going to fly, by the way. There's so much to cover, but we're going to start off today with a poll just to get a sense of who here has experience with unemployment. That'll help us gauge some of the training today, maybe zooming past some features or covering more in the beginning. So I'm going to launch the poll now, and I'm going to be able to, just for the next 15 or 30 seconds, watch the answers roll in, and then I will publish the poll so everyone can see the results. All right, so just sharing the results here. So most people here are beginners. That's perfectly fine. The whole reason we wanted to have this webinar today is because unemployment, as you know, has been such a crisis this year. And we want you to have a basic familiarity with some of the key concepts in unemployment law and with the practice of filing claims and moving from one benefit program to another. That way you can help your clients by issue spotting unemployment or other benefit issues that Legal Aid and CAP might be able to help with. So thank you so much. It's great that you guys are all here. Okay, so let's move on to our slides. I'm going to give a brief introduction and then turn it over to Nicole and Tanya to give us a little more detail about some of these programs. But I mean, as you all know, we've seen catastrophic job losses in DC as a result of the public health emergency. And just to give you a sense of the numbers, 157,000 people have filed unemployment claims since mid-March when Mayor Bowser declared a public health emergency. That is 6 times the total number of claims that DOES received last year. There is really no historical comparison in US history since the unemployment program was launched in the 1930s with the Great Depression that compares to this kind of a spike. So this is a CNBC graphic in one of their news stories that used US Department of Labor data to try and explain this spike. So what you see over on the left is that the historical average of claims filed per week in the US is about 250,000 claims. We exploded those numbers to mid-March, April, May. We saw upwards of 6 million claims filed per week. And remember, this is just initial claims filing. So for each person who filed an initial claim, they're then in the unemployment benefit system on an average of 6 to 9 months with these benefit programs. And then another thing we've seen with the unemployment crisis is, like many of our economic downturns, it hasn't affected all workers equally. So this graphic here talks about as the initial spike of job losses from March, April, May, June started to decline again, and some people were able to get back to work. The question is who? Who was able to resume work in late summer, early fall? And unfortunately, what we know about the recovery data is that white workers were much more likely to be able to resume employment more quickly after the most urgent part of this COVID crisis, and Black workers still have an unemployment rate of twice that of white workers. And what we know from serving DC communities is that Latino and or Hispanic communities in DC are workers who also have been especially hard hit. The public health emergency has required closing restaurants, hospitality, many industries that are very heavily staffed by people of color, including Black workers and especially our Latino and Hispanic neighbors in DC. So many groups have been impacted, but unfortunately, it hasn't been evenly spread across the board. So, what does our country do when we have unemployment numbers like this? Well, the traditional solution in times of economic downturn is that we beef up our unemployment benefit system. So an unemployment benefit system exists all the time, and this is what it is. I'm about to describe some of the eligibility requirements, but then we also add on programs during times of economic downturn, and that's what we're here to discuss today, the kind of patchwork quilt of programs that tie together to try to reach as many workers as possible. So traditional unemployment, it's a weekly cash benefit that goes up to about $444 a week, but that doesn't mean everyone gets that amount. The amount you get per week is based on your past wages. It's about a 50% wage replacement, unless you're a very high income earner. Then of course, $444 a week is not going to be a half replacement for past wages. It's not paid for by taxpayer dollars. In the traditional sense, like other kinds of public benefits. This is a benefit that's paid for by employer payroll taxes. So every employer who hires workers in DC pays a small percentage of taxes on the first $9,000 of that employee's wages. And those very small insurance premiums go together into a large pot, and then DC is able to distribute those funds in times of economic downturn. But there are eligibility requirements that you have to meet in order to be eligible for, again, this is the traditional unemployment insurance system. So to apply in DC, your most recent workplace has to be in DC. You have to be a US citizen or have a work permit. So if you're an undocumented immigrant or you have a citizenship visa or status that does not allow you to work and earn wages, then you're not going to be eligible for unemployment compensation in DC. And nothing with the federal rule changes or local rule changes has changed that. So that's still the case. You have to have sufficient earnings from the past year, year and a half, and then you have to be physically able and available to work. And what that basically means is that, people who are facing a medical illness, a disability or impairment that's caused or aggravated by their work, unemployment is not for those people. Those folks can apply for workers' compensation if they were injured on the job. Those folks can apply for paid family leave in DC, which provides some benefits for a short period of time for people who have a medical illness or a disability where they can't work and they're still connected to work. But unemployment is for people who can work. We saw some exceptions to this for people who can't work right now due to circumstances caused by COVID-19. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The last requirement with unemployment is that you have to lose your job by no fault of your own. Or DC law recently changed with emergency legislation that you lost your job due to circumstances from COVID-19. So probably the most important takeaway here on job losses is that when you quit your job or when a worker quits their job in DC, legally, that puts them in the most challenging position to try and prove that they're eligible for unemployment compensation. Just a very basic rule of thumb that you can take with you is tell your workers, tell your clients, do not quit your job until consulting with an unemployment lawyer or a general employment lawyer. You do not want to be in a voluntary quit situation. It is rarely a good idea in terms of getting your unemployment benefits. There may be other general employment law considerations to take, but that is a very safe rule of thumb. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to talk about some of these new temporary programs that have come about because of COVID.
Okay, thank you. So you can see on this slide, there is a whole list of program names and acronyms after them. So this slide kind of gives an overview. We'll go through each of them one by one to kind of describe what they each are. They can be confusing because some of the acronyms are pretty similar to other acronyms, and the names all have overlapping words in them, like pandemic and unemployment. But hopefully the PowerPoint should provide a good cheat sheet of which each one is. So the first we're going to cover is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. So this program is for workers who are not eligible for standard unemployment benefits. As Drake covered earlier, you have to have had sufficient wages in the last year to year and a half before applying for a regular UI, and you have to have been a W-2 employee to be eligible for regular UI. So as part of the CARES Act, Congress included the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program for workers who wouldn't be eligible for that program. This is for people who don't have the income history, and for people who don't receive W-2s, so independent contractors, people who work for themselves, people who work in the gig economy, like Lyft drivers and Uber drivers. The main requirement for applying for PUA is having lost income due to COVID. So it's only for people who lost a job or lost income because of the pandemic. It is not for people who lost their job for any other reason. And you have to first apply for standard UI and get denied for it in order to apply for PUA. That's a general rule, but in DC in particular, they want you to actually go through and actually fill out the application for standard UI, get a denial, and then fill out a separate application for PUA. So for people who are eligible for regular UI and people who are eligible for PUA, there are a couple of supplemental temporary programs that are available for them. The first one is called Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or FPUC. This is the extra $600 per week that workers got between April 4th and July 25th. A lot of folks that I've spoken to will call it a stimulus check, like the $600 per week stimulus check. It is separate from the stimulus check, which was the $1,200 one-time payment that was for everyone, not just for people receiving UI. So this FPUC payment was an extra $600 every week for workers who are otherwise eligible for at least $1 of regular UI or PUA. It can be collected retroactively for folks who haven't yet applied for PUA or who are applying for back benefits. If you are at any point between now and probably the end of December, at least for PUA, we'll cover that later. If the Department of Employment Services decides you are eligible for at least $1 between April and July, you'll get this extra $600 for those weeks. So the next supplemental program, which is also available for for people who are eligible for regular UI or for PUA, is called the Lost Wages Assistance Program. This is the one that President Trump passed via executive order more recently. It's an extra $300 per week in benefits for those who are receiving at least $100 per week in regular UI or PUA. And those weeks were paid out for August 1st through September 5th. So it's no longer being paid out, but if you are found retroactively eligible for benefits for those weeks, for at least $100 in UI or PUA, you'll get the extra $300. So on top of the supplemental benefits, there are also extension benefits. And Drake, I don't know if you want me to continue, or Tanya, if you want to jump in and cover the extension benefits.
I saw that Tanya had to log off and log back in. Are you still here, Tanya?
I think I am.
Yes, you are. Why don't you chime in?
Yeah, and I don't know if my video is up. I swear, I thought using my phone was going to be easier, but anyhow, let's move on. I think Nicole left at PEUC, which is the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program, and that's a 13-week extension. It follows your regular claim, the exhaustion of your regular claim, and that is going to expire. Merry Christmas. It's going to expire in December. After that 13-week period ends and you've exhausted, then there's the EB, which is an additional 13 weeks of unemployment benefits. And that was added on relatively later in the summer, I believe. But anyhow, and that is an additional 13 weeks at the same weekly benefit amount as you had previously received, whether it was the standard UI and the PEUC. And then lastly, we have the 7-week extension that is, I'm not sure if it's up yet, but that will provide 7 weeks of additional benefits as well. And oddly enough, that expires in December of this year. So, and that brings me to why I'm focused on December, because we don't have a backup plan and we need one. So the only remaining benefits that will be available for anyone that has carryover into 2021 will be the standard UI program as it exists right now for 26 weeks and the EB program that I just mentioned. So as the second bullet point states, we need our Congress to get moving, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So we may be relying on the new administration to put something in place after inauguration. So Drake, can I put it back to you, or do you want me to go back over the overview slide?
I can do the overview slide and then I'll pass it back to you next.
Okay.
So we just ran really quickly through an alphabet soup of different programs, right? We're giving just a high level overview. You're going to have the slides to take home. You're going to have us to email if your clients have questions. Again, the goal is not for you to understand the ins and outs of each of these programs. It's to be able to recognize some of the different names, some of the different issues, and understanding generally how they fit together to provide a safety net for at least some workers for some period of time. Right, so these are the slides that put it all together. I have 2 slides. This first one is for people who are eligible for standard unemployment, right? So this is for the regular W-2 employees, people who, even if there wasn't a CARES Act, even if there wasn't pandemic unemployment assistance for all the people who don't qualify for UI, they would still be getting paid, right? So this is how it strings together. These are how all these programs fit together to pay someone on plain old regular unemployment insurance. The first thing that person gets is the 26 weeks of base benefits, right? And those supplemental benefits have kicked in to up their payment for a certain number of months, right? Hopefully these people were filing claims in April, May, June, July, so they were getting their extra $600 supplement. If they haven't filed claims, please send them to us so we can try and help them file back claims and get access to those dollars. They may have also been filing claims in August, right, when they could get the extra $300 a week. So that's just the plain old regular 26 weeks of UI. But here's where all the extensions come together. And this is the order that these extension programs have to be collected. First, your regular UI folks who exhaust their 26 weeks, they move to the 13 weeks of PEUC. So just to review, again, that's one of the CARES Act programs. This expires at the end of the year. They have to draw down those dollars first. Next, if they're able to get PEUC and they exhaust that, the next thing is that they go to EB, the 13 weeks of extended benefits. And that's that program that already existed, right? So these programs in the green boxes, these are the permanent UI programs. Well, I shouldn't call EB a permanent program because technically it has to be turned on by each of the states when our unemployment level rises high enough. But what I mean by permanent is they exist in the law. It doesn't have anything to do with Congress turning things on or off. It's not a newfangled program. This is an already well used and administered program, right? So you move from regular UI to PEUC to another 13 weeks of EB, and only then can you start to draw your 7 weeks of this more recent extension program. Now, for anyone who's stringing together the math of how all these weeks add up, you'll notice that 26 weeks plus 13 PEUC plus 13 EB, that's already 52 weeks, right? So the 7-week program that expires at Christmas, for someone to be able to be 52 weeks and then another 7 weeks into that extension program, this is not going to be a worker who lost their job due to COVID. This is going to be a worker who was already unemployed when COVID hit, and they haven't been able to return to work because of the unfortunate reality that there were no jobs for them to look for. So unfortunately, the 7 weeks of benefits for the typical UI claimant, very few people are going to be able to draw any of those dollars, right? That's going to be for the person who was unemployed in November 2019 or earlier. Those are the only people who are going to make it all the way through all 4 of these benefit programs. Okay, but let's go to the PUA slide, right? So remember, PUA is the CARES Act program. It's for people who can't get regular UI. So we're talking about independent contractors, small business owners, people who don't have enough wages from the last year or year and a half to be able to qualify for a regular base period for UI. Those folks who would otherwise be excluded from UI are in PUA, and PUA lasts for 39 weeks. So during these 39 weeks, these PUA claimants draw the supplemental benefits, right? They get the FPUC $600 payment. They get the lost wages assistance $300 payment. So that's great. We still want every PUA claimant to file before the end of the year to, again, get the word out in the community that even if you've been denied regular UI, you should at least talk to a lawyer or try to apply for PUA to see if you might be eligible for this extra program. The deadline is the end of December. After that, they're not going to accept any new applications, but we can try and help you get it in an application, file for back benefits back to when you first lost wages due to COVID. So this is the program that's just expiring soon. So again, the green box is the federal program, right? The PUA. There is no other extension program for PUA except for the 7 weeks. So in the previous slide, you had to work your way through 2 different 13-week extension programs. That's not the case with PUA. You can't get access to those programs. The only extension available to you is the 7-week extension. So the 7-week emergency bill that was passed by the council recently, that actually is more helpful for PUA applicants. For PUA applicants who lost work around the time that DC shut down, which was the middle to end of March, those people will exhaust their 39 weeks around in the middle of December. So at least they'll be able to get maybe 2 more weeks of benefits until the end of the year, right? But unfortunately for PUA applicants, there's just nothing left for them in 2021 unless Congress gets their act together and extends benefits. So right now, I think the latest numbers are that 24,000 people have filed for PUA in DC. Not all those claims have been processed, so we don't know how many of those people are eligible, but we're talking about a huge number. And that's like just workers who had a workplace in DC. I mean, huge, hundreds of thousands, millions of people are going to be falling off an economic cliff when PUA expires at the end of this year. So it really is an economic crisis. So that's the overview of the benefit problems or the benefit programs. Now what we want to turn to is walking through some common issues. So Tanya takes a ton of hearings. She already had a hearing this morning. She was telling me when we talked an hour ago. She has a hearing this afternoon, right? So when she's answering her phone all day long, when she's talking to workers all day long, when she's helping people with their unemployment matters, what are some of the most common things we hear? These are questions that your clients might ask you. So we're gonna just go through a couple of these now. So Tanya, I'll turn it to you. If a worker calls you and says, you know, I'm not getting paid and I can't get through to DOES, I can't get through the phone lines, no one is answering to my emails, what do you do? What do you look for in order to try and help that person?
Well, one of the first things that concerns me, and you're right, I get this call or I get several calls a day and emails. One of the things that I first ask is, have they checked their emails? And I mean their inbox as well as their spam, because usually there's something hiding out in that spam or junk mail that will inform them that they need to present something. It may be a copy of their ID and Social Security card. It could be additional wage information. It could be a redetermination that's needed because they may not have enough wages in DC and they need to go and ask for the transfer of wages from another state. So I'm not necessarily going to send them back to a phone that is not going to be answered. My goal is to first ask them, well, what was the last thing you received? When you did get through, what was the last thing that you were told? And so if they're not getting paid and they're not getting an answer from DOES, I usually send them to their email. And if there are not any emails, which is rare, but not uncommon, it's just more likely than not that they missed it, then I'll contact DOES on their behalf to find out what's going on. But that's usually the way that I handle it. So if you and Nicole have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Nicole, why don't you chime in here and talk about the process we use at Legal Aid to try and reach out to DOES, like Tanya was saying.
Yeah, we don't get the volume that Tanya does. We get this question pretty frequently of people who have applied, sometimes months ago, and they have not gotten any helpful information from DOES. In addition to checking email, people can also check their online payment history. Sometimes that has more information, but it often, between those two, you don't have enough information still to figure out what's going on. So we have kind of an email channel that we call the escalation channel, where we email administrators at DOES on clients' behalf. So we invite, if you're working with claimants who are having this issue, you know, you've gathered all the information you can, they've checked their email, they've checked their payment history, and you still can't figure it out, you can refer them to us or to CAP, so that we can use our channels to try to get more information or kind of bump that person up at DOES to get an answer.
Yeah, and in terms of numbers, since we're talking about, you know, how many people are calling our offices for Legal Aid, I just looked at the numbers yesterday. We've had more than 410 people call Legal Aid with a specific unemployment problem since the shutdown began, which for us is a significant increase in the number of unemployment clients we're talking to in a year, because our public benefits team does unemployment, but we also do Social Security, Disability, Medicaid, Medicare, TANF, SNAP. We handle a host of other public benefits matters in our team. So usually there was only one attorney-ish doing unemployment matters. And since the shutdown, we've pulled in attorneys from all of our different practice areas. And we've had between 15 and 18 attorneys at a time working with workers. Tanya, do you have a sense of how many people have called you or how many people you've helped during the pandemic?
Oh no, I can't even begin to count.
It's in the thousands, I'm sure, if not.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm guessing it's in the thousands in terms of.
Oh, definitely in the thousands. Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, if one of the things that I'm concerned about are the people, well, I shouldn't say one of the things, what I'm concerned about are the people that don't know what to do, aren't able to get through and unable to get any answers from anyone else. Those are the and now that we're hitting the December mark, I'm really concerned about how many people that have never availed themselves to the process or have and just got frustrated and gave up. So anyhow, you and I've had that talk a number of times.
Yeah, and that's part of why webinars like this are so important, because we rely on our attorneys and other practice areas to get the word out to your clients, to make sure you are referring people to us, to CAP, when people are expressing frustration. There is something they can do. They can reach out for legal help, and we are trying to help as many people as we can, even though these are kind of non-traditional legal problems. If it wasn't a pandemic, we wouldn't be doing as much back and forth with DOES with these initial problems, but that's what the community needs right now. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to go to this next question. So I'll turn to Nicole. So let's say a client calls you or a worker calls you, Nicole, and says, hey, I was getting benefits, but all of a sudden they've stopped. I didn't get a notice. I don't even know why this is happening. What would you think about, and what would you talk with that person about to try and help them?
Yeah, it's a lot of the same steps as the first, where the first step would be try to investigate, have them check their spam filter, see if they got an email, have them check their payment history online, see if there's more information there. Oftentimes, the problem could be, well, a big issue that a lot of claimants face is filing their weekly claims cards. So there's an obligation after you first apply for UI and for PUA. Every week you have to file a card with DOES, either over the phone or online or by mail if as a last resort, to certify a few things, that you're still unemployed, that you haven't started working, and answer a series of questions. And so a lot of times people either don't know they have to file that every week, or they've gotten some bad advice that they shouldn't, or they just don't know how to fill it out or aren't able to fill it out, or answering a question incorrectly and it's creating a flag at DOES. And then DOES stops paying them and they don't know why. That's one big issue. Another issue is if someone might have, or DOES might be assessing an overpayment for someone. If DOES believes that they overpaid them either for this current round of unemployment or for a prior round of unemployment, if a person had received unemployment benefits up to sometimes 5 or 6 years ago, DOES might be coming back now and keeping their current payments to pay back that overpayment. And again, oftentimes claimants don't get helpful information from DOES if this is happening. They just stop getting paid. There are also times where DOES needs more information from a claimant, sends them an email that might get caught in a spam filter, or sends them a letter asking for more information. Claimants don't receive it, and then they just stop getting paid. So if you can't figure out which one of those it is, or it could be any number of other things, that's another situation where we can escalate that person and ask DOES on their behalf, hey, what's going on? Please provide more information about why this person isn't getting paid.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. And since we're just mentioning overpayments, we don't have enough time today to go through all the different issues that arise in unemployment overpayment matters, but that is something we are actively working on. One thing I want to let folks know is that DOES is continuing to sue unemployment claimants from the past in DC Superior Court during the pandemic. So while the court is shut down for a lot of different cases, while landlords are not allowed to file for evictions, while private creditors are not allowed to file most of their suits, DOES is continuing to file new lawsuits against people who received unemployment benefits in the past and whom DOES claims they overpaid. Sometimes they're 5 or 6 years ago. We got one at Legal Aid recently that was from 2003. The debt was 17, 18 years old. These pose a lot of due process problems and some complicated issues, but we would like to help as many people as possible. So don't be surprised if someone comes to you saying, I don't know why I'm not getting paid. And by the way, my adult son got served with papers about some court date at Superior Court. I thought Superior Court was closed, right? So they may not even understand what these papers mean or how to appear by telephone or WebEx. So that is just another issue. We can't get into all of it today, but just to look out for in our client communities.
Mhm.
So Tanya, this is a really frustrating one. We do have workers calling us and calling you who say, okay, I know what PEUC is, this alphabet soup. I have worked my way through these acronyms. I know that the next extension program I need to file for is called PEUC. But when I apply for it, I thought I was just going to get my money right away. Now I'm being told I have to refile in another state. How can that be possible? So what is going on in this kind of a situation, and why would a worker be coming to you with this kind of problem?
Yes, well, under the federal program, you have to exhaust all possibility of a state claim, whether it's in the current state that you just finished your 26 or your regular claim, your 26-week claim, or if you have additional wages in another state, you have to avail yourself to those state benefits before being entitled to any extension program. And it is frustrating because most often, when you qualify in DC, you have met the benchmark of 444. You may have some leftover wages that were not used, whether it's in DC or Maryland or Virginia, because there's no reason to exhaust any possible wages elsewhere. So those wages are sitting around saying, hey, here I am, as soon as the 26 weeks ends, and you have to avail yourself to them. So that is why claimants are being told to refile in another state. And it could be a combined wage claim, it could be just a separate claim in the state of Virginia. The unfortunate thing is that you start a 26-week claim, most likely at a very low weekly benefit amount, much lower than what you had received in DC at the max. And then the other bad news is, although you probably won't have to be concerned about it, is if you qualify for an extension at the exhaustion of that new claim in another state, your weekly benefit amount for your extension will likely reflect the same amount as that new claim in the other state. So that's what's going on. And then I am noticing also just the basic hiccup and pause as you transition from regular to PEUC. And that's purposefully done just to check to see if there are any wages out there. And that process can be quite taxing because there is a delay for a period of time as they do that. So I don't know if you and Nicole want to jump in on that one, but yep, that's what I've experienced.
Yeah.
Or I've seen others experience, I should say that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. This is a complicated situation and you broke it down really well. Let's move on to a fourth question.
There's actually a question in the chat. Can workers file in multiple states concurrently if they have eligible wages?
No. So there's an interstate database so that in DC, they are going to get a flag if you are filing in DC and you have an open claim in another state. You're not allowed to claim unemployment in 2 states at once. It's just 1 state at a time. What you can do is in your current claim, whichever one is the proper place to file, which is usually based on where your workplace was, though in some states you can file just if you were a resident, but you can ask that state unemployment office to do the combined wage claim, which Tanya was talking about. So pulling in the wages from all these other states from the same time period. That's part of why this PEUC thing is so frustrating, because most people didn't know or didn't need the combined wage claim when they first filed for DC. So maybe 26 weeks ago, if they had filed a combined wage claim to pull in, for example, that tiny little part-time job that gave you some wages in Virginia, maybe if they had pulled that into the original claim, they would now be getting PUC at a high rate and not have to drop off to Virginia. But it's just a weird quirk of the system, but you do have to be in 1 claim at a time. So Nicole, what are we doing for people who say, okay, I'm not going to get anywhere close to exhausting my 39 weeks of PUA before the end of the year when the program expires, because I spent 2 months trying to get through on the phone lines, or I spent, weeks trying to understand how to fill out the PUA application online because it wasn't available in my language. What are we doing for folks who weren't able to file weekly claims?
Yeah, so there are two different answers depending on which program you're getting benefits from. So for regular UI, your benefits start as of when DOES receives your application. So not when you start trying to file it, not when you lose your job, but when they receive the application. And then after they receive the application, you start to receive benefits, you still have an ongoing obligation to file the weekly claims cards. So if you had trouble filing your initial application for regular UI, that's the toughest situation for trying to go back and get prior weeks. So there you can attempt to, or call us to attempt to help a claimant explain to DOES, look, I have all this proof that I spent weeks and weeks trying to file my initial application. Can you please accept these prior claims cards? And it's up to their discretion to accept those, so it can be tough. After initial claimants filed for regular UI, if you had trouble filing your weekly claims cards, it's a very similar process, asking DOES to accept those late filed claims cards and provide you benefits for those weeks. For people who are applying for PUA, when you file your initial PUA application, you can get benefits back to when you first lost your job or lost income due to COVID. At that initial application, it includes back claims cards. So that's a really great benefit to PUA that's not available for regular UI. It's automatic that they give you this opportunity to claim back to when you lost your job due to COVID. But for the ongoing claims cards, that if you are you file for PUA, you're fine eligible for PUA, you start to receive benefits, but then for whatever reason can't file your claims cards, then you have to go through a similar process as for regular UI and ask for DOES to go back and accept, using their discretion, to accept those late claims cards. So for the processes where it involves DOES discretion, you can refer those claimants to us to help kind of break through the DOES system through our escalation process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Nicole, can you tell us more about what kind of proof? You said proof that I was trying to call for weeks. I know most of us, when we're trying to get through the phones or we're trying to get through maybe an online application, we don't think to gather proof of that, like a screenshot. What kind of proof are we talking about that DOES will need or that legal aid can help people produce?
Yeah, and I can't really speak to what DOES thinks that they need, but from what we've suggested to people and recommended to people, your cell phone is a great source of information for calls that you've made. You can go back and look at your call log and you can see like, oh, I tried calling DOES 17 times over the past 3 weeks to try to file my claims card. As Drake mentioned, a lot of people don't take screenshots as they're trying to fill things out online, but that would be a great example of if you try to file your claims card online or try to file your initial UI online and you got an error message, taking a screenshot or a photograph of that with your phone would be really helpful. I'm trying to think, Drake, is there other proof that would be helpful in showing that people have applied or tried to apply or try to file their claims cards?
Mm-hmm. We've helped clients or we've suggested clients to write sworn statements so they can swear under penalty of perjury that a statement is true and then present their story, right? So some people don't have phone records or they don't have call histories that go back far enough, but they can describe in detail all the steps they took to try to file that were unsuccessful. Or they can explain, I was sick with COVID, right? We have people who produce like hospital discharge records, notes from their doctor showing that they were under a quarantine order because they had a positive COVID test. So they don't have a computer in their home. They couldn't go to their neighbor down the street who usually lets them use their computer, right? Because they were under quarantine. I mean, we've seen every story out there, all very sympathetic for why people are not able to access these systems. at a time when, the public libraries are closed. It's not easy to get access to a computer. Many of legal aid's clients, don't have desktop or laptop computers at home. A lot of folks rely on smartphones for their cell phone access or their internet access, excuse me. And unfortunately, the DOES claims website is not compatible with mobile phones. We have maybe one or two clients who have somehow been able to figure it out, how to navigate the very awkward boxes that sometimes don't click. But the majority of clients need to be on a desktop or laptop. So yeah, the tech barriers are real, and the pandemic related barriers to filing are real. So I don't think we've had a single case like this, a back benefits case, that's been denied yet. I shouldn't even say that. I'm knocking on wood. I don't want to invite that. But it is very important to have legal counsel. It's going to be much more successful, and it can be a lot of money that people are leaving on the table. So definitely send those cases to us. Those requests would have to be in before the end of December. So again, it's a ticking clock. Okay.
There's a question that came up in the chat. If someone has two jobs and they just lose one of them, like if they have a part-time and a full-time and lose the full-time or lose the part-time, can they still be eligible for benefits? And I can start. The answer really is it depends. Like it depends both on how much money they're making at either of those jobs, and it depends on whether they were W-2 jobs or 1099 jobs. So you really have to look at each case individually. It could be that they might be eligible for benefits.
Yeah.
And I'll add a little more. If they are entitled to benefits, it will more than likely be partial benefits. And we'll get to the reporting requirements for that. But I would guess that you would have to lose a full-time job in order to avail yourselves to unemployment, any significant dollar amount on a weekly basis of unemployment. So
that's right. Yeah. And the most important takeaway, the rule of thumb in this area, is report gross wages every single week. It is so important to prevent overpayments, prevent getting too much in benefits, or DOES accusing you of fraud if you don't report those part-time wages. Those continuing claim forms that Nicole was talking about that have to be filed every week to get UI or PUA. There's a question on there about, have you earned any wages this week? So you need to put in the gross wages before taxes that you earned. Even if you haven't been paid those wages, put them in when earned. So yeah, we'll revisit that again. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and we only have one more question. Gosh, I know Tanya gets this the most. We get it as well, but just with the volume, I know Tanya just gets hammered with this, right? Just people are really anxious right now. Tanya, what do you say to people who are really scared about their benefits expiring?
You know what, Drake, to be honest with you, I don't know what to say. I mean, all of the programs that my organization has access to for rental assistance are not really available, and they don't have the funds to assist. I know many in the city, as well as in the surrounding counties, many of the property management companies are providing some latitude. And of course, many of the county and states and DC have for a period of time restricted eviction processes. And you would have to remind me of what that deadline and whether that deadline has passed. I actually represented someone that worked for a rental company, and she was just emotionally just drained and resigned because of the constant, I guess, questions, pleading with people she's known for years who are fearful of being, or were fearful of being, evicted. But anyhow, Nicole, Drake, do you all have anything to share?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a heartbreaking situation, right? Like, I mean, so to harken back to an old slide, right? Congress needs to act. So clients who are willing to, and us, lawyers, advocates, workers who are willing to share their story and call their representatives. We need you. We need your voices to get the political will for our US government to pass an extension to the CARES Act. People are going to be hurting. In terms of local advocacy, people can call the mayor, people can call a council member, either an at-large council member if they're outside of DC, they don't live here, they can call Alyssa Silverman, who's the head of the Labor Committee, or they can call their local council person. One, council persons and the mayor have constituent funds. Now, not enough to pay everyone's rent, but they are there for discretionary funds for people undergoing hardship. So people should be asking for these funds, and DC policymakers or politicians should be giving these funds to as many people as they can. But we need more cash assistance. So local advocacy, federal advocacy, if people are being sued for eviction, please. We also have a landlord-tenant hotline that you can find at legalaid.dc.org. I'm sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head, but our general intake line is 202-628-1161. And you can also find that online. Please call us for legal advice for housing or representation for future eviction matters. So I'm sorry I don't have anything better to share there. Besides, we need your voice. Join the movement. Join the movement to call for more benefits and more help. Nicole, you have anything here?
No, you guys covered it.
Right, and then there's all these other issues that we're seeing and we're getting calls about that we don't have time to go over today. But here's just a list of them that you can reference later. The remaining parts of I should say, we do have a DC advocacy opportunity, which is that, again, Silverman is the head of the DC Council Labor Committee, and she is holding monthly roundtables this fall and winter. The next one is December 9th. So you can contact our offices or go to the DC Council website. And if you are an affected worker, if you are an advocate, you have a story to share, you are welcome to testify at that roundtable. If you know someone who has just been trying over and over and over to resolve an issue with DOES and has not been able to get through, signing up for these witness lists is often the best way to get DOES's attention. They will sometimes respond within hours of getting the witness list from the council of who is about to show up on a publicly recorded roundtable and blast the agency. So they do pay attention to people who come and tell their stories. This is another avenue for resolving client problems. The rest of these slides today, these are really just for your reference. We're not going to be going in detail through the information about how to file for benefits. You file in DC if your last workplace was in DC. We have the information for you about how to file, language access, the website, the PUA claim. And then probably, the most important takeaway, which I know we've already covered a little bit, is just making sure if you are in touch with a worker who is filing for unemployment, let them know, hammer it home. If you return to work, if you earn any wages, you need to report them on your claims forms. Avoid fraud, avoid overpayments, report your wages. And these forms can be confusing. A lot of our clients don't know what gross wages mean, but letting them know it's their pre-tax dollars, so their hourly wage multiplied by the number of hours they work that week, and they can estimate that if they don't already get paid, for example, every Friday. Most of our clients now don't get paid every Friday, so they don't actually know how much they've earned, but they can estimate it, and they have to estimate it. That is their legal duty in filing these claims forms. So I can't state that strongly enough. Tanya, do you want to chime in on this?
No, I mean, you've covered it. And I would, even if you make a mistake or you know someone that has made the mistake, I would rather that they contact the agency, be proactive and contact the agency so that you're not accused of, at least if you are accused of fraud, you can at least fall on the sword and say, at least I came to you and brought this to your attention. And I'm willing to fix it, because while you're getting benefits now, it may be a small price to pay to have those benefits reduced to pay that overpayment, since we're talking more likely about not reporting part-time earnings or under-reporting, like you reported net versus gross. It may seem like a bitter pill to swallow, so to speak, but it's much better than the challenge years from now when you least expect it and your taxes are intercepted, or you go to claim benefits and this particular issue rears up and prevents you from filing a claim, because that's what fraud will result in, the inability for a period of time to file a very valid claim of unemployment. So that's just my small 2 cents on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a painful place to be for workers, but absolutely prevention is the best way. So DOES has databases that they run, I believe, on a weekly, if not daily basis, that are for people who are earning taxable wages right now. So this is something that DOES will catch. This is not something someone's going to get away with. So if they are earning wages, they're getting a paycheck, they're getting on payroll, they need to report it to DOES as soon as it's earned.
Drake, you have a question about the Legal Aid Housing Hotline. Is it the same as the Landlord-Tenant Legal Assistance Network?
That is such a good question, and I'm embarrassed that I don't know the answer. I believe that
something you knew because I didn't know.
I believe that the housing or the Tenant Landlord Assistance Network. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling the name, but I believe that is an intake line that refers cases to all of the housing providers in DC. So I do believe that's the same thing, and I apologize for not knowing that for sure. But there is a brand new, as this chatter knows, there is a brand new hotline that brings together all of the legal services providers that do eviction defense to try and make an easier, smoother intake process for tenants who are being sued. So we're trying to reduce the barriers to getting people lawyers and get as many lawyers to tenants as possible to provide representation. So that's a great hotline to look out for. If anyone is confused about where to call or when, just call our legal aid intake line. It's 202-628-1161. We also have an online intake form. So
Hi, this is Ruth. We go by LT Lawn, if it makes it easier. And I am one of the intake specialists that answers the phone. So that's why I was just curious if the legal aid, because you are one of the partnering organizations, just was curious if you had like a separate intake line that also did housing intakes and answer questions in addition to the LT Lawn. And I can provide the LT Lawn number here for anyone that wants to refer clients.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That is an awesome resource, and I'm so glad you're here. Let me follow up with you by email once I get a chance to check with our housing specialists. I'm sorry that I don't know the answer today, but I'm sure many of attendees will have clients who need the LT Lawn hotline. So thank you for educating us on that. All right, so just the last point is that appeal deadlines have been told. This is usually a 15-day deadline to appeal. Right now, during the public health emergency, that's been lifted. So it's a lot easier to get in to have a hearing, even if the person is past the 15-day deadline. So that's all the time we have today. There are a couple more slides, but they're really just about how to reach us and how to reach our partner organizations that also provide general employment law help, because so many folks have an unemployment issue and another issue related to disability, how they got fired, and other matters. So we're really happy to be here. Thank you so much for letting us present today.
Yes. And everyone have a wonderful holiday. Safe distancing, though.
Thank you for joining us. The link to the slides is in the chat, and feel free to email me if you have any issues with that. But thanks so much, everyone.